Uh, my name is Andrew, and this is my feasibility proposal presentation. And I did my project on keeping the Laposada Dining Hall open later at UNM. So, to begin, as a student on living on campus at UNM, we have a variety of options when it comes to food, but most of these options are inconvenient. And for students who are up later studying, such as myself, there we have limited options when it comes to after hours dining, specifically around after 10 p.m. And living in Albuquerque, going off campus to find food is not always the safest option. So my proposal is to keep the dining hall open later so students have more access to food uh, at a safer location. So here's an example of our various food options we have around campus. As you can see here, La Posada Dining Hall is open until 10 p.m. It should be instead of 6 p.m. Or these are the first week of school hours. But for these other options in the Student Union building, we have Subway, the Union Club, Dion's, Mercado, which is the market there, Chick-fil-A, Twisters, and Mendeley Express. And the other primary option for food that students have late at night is the market at the SRC, which is usually open until 1 a.m. So the problem here is 35% of college students stay up past 3 a.m. at least once a week, according to Mattress Advisor. And the dining hall closes at 10 p.m., leaving students with no other food options on campus besides the SRC market. However, as we'll get into later, that's not always the most reasonable or efficient method of getting food late at night. And according to the Albuquerque Police Department, 88% of crimes against people in Albuquerque in 2022 were classified as assault or aggravated assault. And traveling off campus is late at night. Late at night is unsafe for students, as we'll see in the next slides. So we can see here during the Albuquerque Police Department mid-year crime report, the total amount of crimes committed against a person in 2022 around the mid-year mark was 6,054. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see here that over 5,000 of those crimes reported against persons were either aggravated assault or simple assault. So that is a very large percentage of crimes committed against people being some kind of involving bodily harm against a student. And most of these will take place late at night and in the secluded areas where students may go to find food late at night. So the plan here is, my plan would be to extend the La Posada Dining Hall hours until 12 a.m. Daily. The first step would be to create polls to see which students would, one, be willing to work at that time, and two, which students are up late at past 10 p.m. Studying and who want food at that hour. And the next step would be to adjust the shifts for current hours to accommodate for new hours. And we wouldn't be keeping it open for an extensive amount of time, just an extra 2 hours at night, which would give students a reasonable window to go get food after hours, especially if students take classes that get out late at night around 9:30, as I have in the past. And that leaves me with a 30-minute window to travel across campus and get to the dining hall before it closes, which is not always possible. The step 3 would be to find funding for the additional costs, and those additional costs would be hiring new employees, keeping the food stations open, and then supplying the food for those extra 2 hours, so extra food supplies for those 2 hours, and additional janitorial and operating costs, such as electricity and things like that. So we can find funding for that. And then the fourth step would be to hire new employees if needed. So that would be kitchen staff, chefs, janitors, lobby staff, things like that. And the last step would be to implement these hours if we decide to move forward with the proposal. And as we can see here, this article in 2016 illustrated that La Posada was open 24 hours a day for student convenience. Obviously, this was before COVID-19 and before the limitations on dining in person were implemented as a result of the pandemic. But we can see that it was possible and that it is feasible. So I think that there's a good reason for us to bring that back. And we wouldn't even be keeping it open for 24 hours. It would just be for an extra 2 hours a day, which I think would be beneficial to the students. Right. So the cost, as we talked about, the cost associated with keeping the dining hall open later would be the cost of hiring new employees, maintaining food supplies for an extra 2 hours, and the cost of additional maintenance for 2 hours. And some ways to offset costs would be to restrict the seating. So we could restrict the seating to just the main level dining and not the second floor. And we'd also limit the food options at late hours. So we wouldn't have the full palette of items available. Only staple items such as pizza, pasta, rice, things like that. So that way we could cut down on the costs for keeping up the food supply for those extra 2 hours while still remaining open.